I would consider myself a fairly spiritual person, although my understanding of what spirituality is might be very different to someone else's understanding, and that's expected and normal and good. But I was very, very deep in online and in person New Age communities for quite some time. At least a year, maybe 2 years. Very, very much in online New Age spaces as well, and following a lot of, healers and gurus, and some of them because I thought they were useful, and some of them because I just wanted to see what they were going to say about certain things. Something I've really realized is that the foundational understanding of New Age spirituality has not diverged as much from the church as it might want to believe it has. I've witnessed a huge amount of sexism in New Age communities online, and the internalization of that sexism in person a lot. I've noticed that a lot of people who run retreats or who are or claim to be healers, or run programs, healing programs, or self-discovery programs, or deprogramming programs, really perpetuate harmful stereotypes and sexist constructs. I started to feel really uncomfortable with a lot of the language in the community, especially around polarity and femininity and masculinity and reclaiming and getting back in touch with our divinity as humans, our connection to divinity as humans, which I think is great, to connect or reconnect to divinity as a human, but not if it is through a patriarchal, sexist lens. That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help men, and it certainly doesn't help women. I realized that even though so much of the language was appealing, even though so much of what was being spoken about resonated, even, that sexism was essentially being disguised. Deep sexism was being disguised through spiritual jargon with very unhelpful, outdated, sexist gender roles being reinforced as divine. And it took me a long time to realize how not healing that is. I'm certainly not speaking about everyone, but a large portion of both the men and the women, I would say maybe even more the women than the men, mostly because there are more women than men in that space, were really, really pushing this as a grand revolution, as a great revelation. Actually, gender roles are divine. Gender roles are divinely ordained. Performative femininity is actually a really, really healing thing. Get a grip. No shade. Get a grip. All the talk about divine masculinity, divine femininity, I realized that so much of it is just about reinforcing sexist stereotypes and gender roles that women have been fighting against, that some men have been fighting against, but that negatively affect women the most, the world over, that have been put in place and held in place by religion, by institutions. The idea that it's virtuous, that it's a good thing, that it makes a woman closer to God, if she's feminine. This is not new. This is not new. The church, religions the world over have pushed this idea for centuries. That it makes a man closer to God if he's this, that, or the other, if he's a strong man, if he's a leader, if he's macho, if, he makes a woman submit to him, and it makes a woman close to God and healed and a good woman, or more divine if she's submissive, or if she's, very overtly feminine, or this is not new, and it's also not helpful. Make no mistake, I take a lot of issue with what's being promoted within like the women's health, the women's spiritual community as well, but I'll get to that in a minute. Right now, I just wanted to say that like so many of the spiritual communities for men that I've seen so categorically refuse to center women, to center their understanding of anything around the impacts of whatever the issue is that they're talking about on women. It is so individualistic, and I personally see like a hyper individualistic perspective in both the men's and women's communities under the bubble of the new age spiritual online space. I really do see that in both as a kind of continuous thread, or maybe an underpinning even of the understanding itself. Most of the male coaches I've seen, even, if not outright misogynistic, saying, women should submit, and it's women who don't submit are unhealed, which is perpetuated within women's groups as well, but we'll get there in a moment. Or even that like it's men's nature to lead and it's women's nature to follow, and not all the time, but a lot of the time leaning individualistic, macho, never talking about systemic issues, never talking about historical issues, understanding history as the basis of life as we know it. Not often promoting critical thinking, and often promoting, this cultural norm of refusing to take accountability, which I think is very unhelpful in terms of personal growth and spiritual deepening into one's spiritual understanding. I think that taking accountability both personally and understanding one's part of a system is actually key to spiritual growth and spiritual understanding, but it just perpetuates a harmful norm. A lot of them promote narcissistic thought and emotional and psychological patterns, and it really, it left me with this question of like, how can men who are good men, they want to do the work, the men who are following these guys, they want to do the work, they want to invest in themselves, they want to grow, they want to be healthier, they want to be happier, they want greater understanding a lot of the time of the world or of spiritual issues. How can men who are already there, already concerned, already interested, and how can these men actually contribute to women's liberation, to the creation of a fair and harmonious society? Because I don't have the answers, but I can tell, looking at a lot of these gurus, these coaches, these facilitators, they don't have the answers either. This brings me to the women. The one thing that has made me the most livid in these communities, what I have seen is within women's communities, within women's pages, talks, videos, posts, perpetuating the idea that it is healthy and good and desirable, the most desirable, for women to perform in a sexualized manner, but this time it's empowering. This time it's in alignment with God or goddess, and this time it's an expression of divinity. I've got videos on choice feminism that go really deep into this, but this is such a prime example of liberal feminism, choice feminism, and why it just doesn't work. Because that is one of the most regressive things you can say. If you have any understanding of what performative femininity is, if you have any understanding of femininity as a form of oppression, to say things like or to demonstrate that in order to be healed, and in order to be sexually healed, you need to be comfortable, you need to embrace performing sexually in a sexualized manner, demonstrating that this is the peak of healed womanhood. This is the peak of, holistic being as a woman. That to be, powerful, sexually empowered, is to be wearing next to nothing and like dancing in a very sensual, sexualized manner. I have no problem with sensual dancing. I think that's wonderful. But it goes beyond that most of the time, especially when, you can see she's not wearing underwear. You can see that, maybe she's just covering herself with like a leaf or a cloth and she's actually naked. Or, I've seen this so much online within these new age spaces, these influencers or coaches or, people saying like, oh, in order to, embrace your sexuality, in order to be empowered, to have sexual power, to tap into your sexual power, your sensual self, is to be performatively feminine and to really go into having polarity, which is essentially, layman's terms, being submissive to men. God damn. And really softening into that femininity and to be soft and to be desirable and to really love being submissive is the sign that, you're healed as a woman. Jesus fucking Christ, yo. Fuck off. And I mean that shit. Fuck off. When you start, and the worst part is I've seen it from women. It's disappointing. I've seen it from women. This labeling of women who like me get mad at that. Women who are like, actually, hold on a moment. Let's actually look at this from a little maybe more of an objective perspective. Let's actually discuss this. We get labeled as unhealed. We get labeled as bitter. We get labeled as having internalized misogyny for challenging the idea that performative femininity, that performative sexuality, that catering to the idea that being submissive sexually is just the most natural, organic way to be as a woman. Those of us who maybe challenge that and question that, we're unhealed, and our trauma that is so similar to the trauma that these women admit to wanting to heal through their spirituality, that those experiences are held against us. Oh, you're not able to work through your trauma. I'm not unhealed because I don't want to perform for men, because I don't want to be submissive, because I don't want to embrace the idea that as a woman, somehow my healthiest state is one of submission. And those of us who have been harmed, those of us who know someone who's been harmed, know that a lot of the time it was due to being forced to submit. And the idea that it is somehow healing to now submit, but this time for me, is misguided at best, naive at best, and manipulative and regressive at worst. And I become livid when I see these things being perpetuated in communities that are supposed to be supportive. Please, if you are a woman and you have felt uncomfortable in these spaces, if you have felt uncomfortable watching and listening to both men and women within the spiritual new age space, online or in person, talk about these issues, know that you are not wrong, you are not unhealed, you are not bitter or less sacred or less enlightened because you question it. And please know that the road to healing is not a performative one. Know that it's okay to be uncomfortable with being told to express your femininity in a performative manner, that the idea that femininity exists at all as an innate and desirable quality or set of qualities, behaviors, attitudes is regressive. And know that your healing as an individual, male or female, is probably going to be much better aided by the idea that there is no right way to be a man or a woman. And there's no wrong way. There is not a set of behaviors, masculinity, femininity, that your adherence to speaks to your level of enlightenment or healing. It's not the case. And it's incredibly unhelpful. And I'd be really, really curious to hear if anyone else has had similar thoughts or similar experiences, both online or in person, around these issues. I'd be really, really curious what other people have to say. I hope you're well. I hope that was interesting. And I'll see you next time.